Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for being here and joining us today for a video that I think is quite fun. It's a little bit more lighthearted than usual. We're going to be looking and reacting to the FIFA ratings or the FC 25 ratings of the Usmnt players. We have a pretty bit long list right here as it is. If we have the time, judging on how long the video is going, we're going to go and move on into some Olympians, some players that are on the fringes. But starting off with the highest rated player, Brayden, we have Christian Pulisic. His overall is at 83 this year, so he got an upgrade by 4 points, if you want to call it that. What are your thoughts on it? Do you agree? Do you think it should be higher, should be lower?
Yeah, well, just a quick disclaimer. If there's any players, obviously there's a lot of Americans. Some of them we aren't going to be able to cover, obviously, in the video. So if there's anyone who you want our reaction to their rating or how high they went up or whatever in the comments, make sure to comment, and we'll definitely be replying to everyone because, I mean, there's a lot of players we won't be able to talk about in the video, but there's a lot that are definitely worthy of discussing as well. But for Pulisic, I think this is super well deserved. To be honest, I think he was very underrated in last game. He started as a 79. I mean, obviously, I think dynamic form put him up a little bit, but that's not the card you get in Ultimate Team. So having him be an 83, especially, I think he has 5-star weak foot now. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's a very well-deserved upgrade. Personally, I think I even put him up towards an 85, but the fact that he went up by so much, it proves that they were watching, they were impressed by his incredible season last year. And I mean, the way he started off this season, I wouldn't be surprised to see another +4 upgrade if he keeps it up.
I think it's fair, really. Compared to last season, 83 is just fair. If he continues to perform like this, then I think he'll definitely get an upgrade to an 85, maybe 86 next year. But I think for now, it's fair. Moving on right here to Sergiño Dest, the best right back in the world, one of my favorite players. He has a 79 rating, so he got an upgrade by 3. I don't know. Thoughts on this one, Brayden?
Yeah, I think, again, he definitely deserved the +3 upgrade. I do think that the 76 he had before was fair, just based on how poorly he had done at Barcelona, at Milan. But at PSV, we all know, team of the season type year for PSV before suffering, unfortunately, the ACL injury that has him out for the first half of this season. I'll be very curious to see if he can actually maintain his form, so maybe he could get a slight downgrade in next FIFA just because he'll only play half the season. But if he can maintain the form, I think 79 is more than fair, to be honest. For a top player in Eredivisie, I would honestly expect 80 clubs, so 79 might even be a little too low.
Yeah, I think even though I think it's a little too low because I love the guy, I think it's fair. 79, it's a fair rating for him. I'm pretty sure he's a 5-star skill mover, which is fair as well. And moving on right here to Antonee Robinson, the most consistent American we have. Well, now Pulisic can put that one as an argument as well, can put up a fight for that argument, but he has been the most consistent American we have abroad and shining through. He has gotten us an upgrade as well, which I think is well deserved. He was really, really low rated in the past, especially when compared to other Prem left backs. He's a 79 rated, +3 points as well. Seems to be the trend so far. What do you think about this one, Brayden?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see all of our players going up. It proves that we had a very good successful season, at least with the clubs last year, not necessarily with the national team. But honestly, I still think this is too low. I know that EA tend to rate fullbacks lower because, let's face it, they're probably one of the least important positions on the pitch. Not saying they're not important, but when you compare to everything else, it kind of makes sense. But some of the left backs that he's behind, I just don't think are reasonable, and especially being like several ratings behind players like Luke Shaw, Andy Robertson, that he's been better than and more consistent than in the past couple of seasons in the Premier League. I would put him higher personally, but I mean, as a left back, it kind of makes sense. And he has a lot of pace as well. I mean, we know he got at the team of the season last year. He'll probably get another one if he keeps up his form this year. So that's really what I would focus on.
I actually think it's a fair rating, to be honest, because although I think he's more consistent and reliable than some of those guys, well, definitely better than Luke Shaw in every sense, in my opinion, I still think he's not as influential to the game as a guy like Andy Robertson. So for FIFA, for FC standards, I actually agree. I think a 79 is just fair for Jedi. Moving on to Wes, who had that whole drama. He stayed, his card's still at Juventus. As we know, he stayed there, and he got a 78, a boost of 2 points as well. 78 for Wes. Do you think that one's fair?
I mean, for a starter for Juventus, I think 78 is more than reasonable. And even, again, I mean, we've talked about the situation with him so many times. He just keeps fighting his way back into the 11, despite how many times they want to get rid of him. I think 78 is fair. I don't know if maybe he should be a little bit higher. I think his national team performance over the summer was very underwhelming. He showed up unfit, a little bit unmotivated. So I think 78 makes a lot of sense, but I definitely wouldn't have put him lower. And the fact that he got a +2 upgrade shows, to be honest, as a 76 last year, I think his performances warranted more than a +2 upgrade, especially considering how poor he was at Leeds at the end of 2 seasons ago. But overall, a 78 makes sense.
I'll be honest, this is maybe a hot take right here, but I grew up playing the game, and to be an 80, you had to be so good. I watched like Aaron Ramsey, even in his great days at Arsenal, he barely got to touch an 80, and now West is a 78. I'll be honest, just for the way this game has always rated midfielders, I would rate him lower. I love West, but I think 76 is just fine, really, for a guy like him. 78, I know that now it kind of inflated just like the market with the ratings, but I don't know. I think like 78 is definitely right. I would actually be flattered if I was West, just looking on him the way that the game used to grade the midfielders back in the day. Let me know in the comments too. What do you think about well, let's talk about the game as well. What do you guys think? It has changed so much recently. I feel like some of these cards are strictly for Ultimate Team, which is the focus now for EA. That's a topic for another video if you guys ever want that. But moving on to Tyler Adams right here. Barely played. He's kind of like a zombie these days. He's just there, comes back and gets injured again. 77 for Tyler, so he got a downgrade, which I think is warranted. Only 1 point, though. I think they were actually kind to him. Do you agree with this one, Brayden?
Well, I think you kind of just need to get with the times here, because I know maybe compared to the past, the ratings are a little bit higher, but if you compare Weston to our other midfielders, Tyler Adams, for example, I mean, you'll see the other ones, we'll get to them. I think a 78 for West is more than fair, considering what the other guys' ratings are. Maybe they're all too high, who knows, that's a different discussion, but I think relative to the other guys, it makes sense. And I think the reason Adams only got a -1 is because, for one thing, he was also injured with Leeds at the end of last season, so it's kind of just same old for him. Also, in the 3 games that he was healthy for, he scored a screamer for the USMNT and won man of the match for Bournemouth. So I think it makes sense having him at a 77. That being said, I am a little bit worried about his ability to keep up basically what he was doing before the injury whenever he does end up coming back after 3 decades or so. It seems like it's been that long. But I think for now, from what we've seen, the 77 does kind of make sense. Maybe 1 or 2 lower, though.
Yeah, I actually agree with this one if he was playing consistently. So I think if we're just grading the players, 77 sounds right. I think it's sounding about right. We can't really forget how good he is, but I'm curious to see, will he have the little icon for injury prone when you sign him on career mode? Because I know that Gio has that. I think it's about time for Adams to get that upgrade right there. But moving on to Folarin Balogun, it's our first striker right here, the highest graded striker by EA. He gets a 77 as well in Monaco after a very shaky season. I'm actually surprised that he got this boost right here, which was, well, he actually got a downgrade right here. So what do you think, Brayden?
Well, I think they can change, on your earlier point, I think they can change the injury prone thing to just American flag, because it seems to be the trend for our players. It's the American badge. Once you get injured, you're truly a USMNT player. But for Balogun, I think the -2 does make sense. We know his ability. I don't think I would have put him any lower. I mean, especially after that season that he had just 2 seasons ago at Holmes. But I mean, I think it's very fair to say his season last year was a little bit shaky. It was his debut year with Monaco. There's a lot of pressure on him being a money signing, and I mean that's a completely different topic. But I do think the more money a player gets signed for, the more likely they are to flop, because there's always that external pressure put on them. I wouldn't say that Balogun's a flop yet. He's still young. It's still his 2nd season. Despite that, he did get, I think it was 8 goals, 5 assists or whatever in all competitions, which isn't necessarily a horrible tally. I mean, it's definitely better than some other players that weren't labeled flops, for instance. But I think a 77 is very fair here.
I think they're actually doing him a big favor. I mean, come on. And for a striker, he was 79. That's insane. He was 79 last year's game. I think it's crazy, really. I don't think he ever did anything to warrant a 79. 77 is fine. I would just leave it at that. I think that just the way I grew up playing the game, now the ratings are so crazy. I really don't think that he's a 77. I would rate him actually 76, 75-ish, with a good potential, though, because he's young. But I don't know. I'm curious to see what you guys think about these thoughts on the comments below. Now we have one that I'm sure you're completely in agreement with. We have CCV right here. I'm shocked to say this, our highest graded center back. He's 77, the Celtic player. Wow, we saw how good he is against Panama. Do you agree with this rating right here, Brenden?
Well, I will say he only got a +1 from last game, which honestly, I wouldn't have even given him that. Even if you just look at the club performances, I think he was a lot more consistent 2 seasons ago than he was last season, especially when you factor in the injury that he had at the start of last season. Obviously, that's something he can control, and it was good that he could come back well with that. But I think he's a little bit beneficial here for just playing at Celtic, playing in an easy league, racking up the clean sheets against horrible opponents. No offense to Scotland or their league, but let's face it, the teams are pretty bad. Having him be our highest rated center back is a complete and utter joke, especially ahead of someone like Chris Richards. I mean, we'll get to him, but the fact that he was starting week in, week out for Crystal Palace for the entire second half of the season, it's just disgraceful. And I mean, I've talked about his performance, CCV, at the Copa America and this summer as a whole so many times now. I'm sure you guys are tired of me hating on the guy, but he shouldn't even be a gold card. Let's be real. I don't even know if I'd put him on this list of top 24 players. Austin Trusty isn't on this list, and I would definitely have Trusty better.
Yeah, no, I agree with that last point. But yeah, I think that what happens with CCV right here is the MLS EA effect, which the league is so bad that the best team on the league, the players are going to be rated a little bit above what they actually are, because there's no way that you really think he's a 77. Anyone, I don't think even his mother would rate him a 77 right here, but I would actually put him at 74, 7, and that would be stretching it, to be quite honest. But moving on right here to Malik Tillman, I'm glad to see that Tillman has a really high rating. I'm pretty sure he has a good potential. I don't know what it is, but if you sign him on career mode, it should be an exciting one. He gets a big boost right here of 3+, which I think is pretty nice. He had his very first consistent season at a better level. He left the Scottish Premiership. So what do you think? Do you agree with this one?
Yeah, to your point about the potential, one thing that I really like about being a USMNT fan, and I mean, this kind of just isn't really relevant in the grand scheme of things, but on career mode, you can sign so many of our players, the guys that we're talking about now, and even some of the prospects up and coming, and you can always build them up to such great players with the new dynamic potential. It's just really fun building a full American team at a club and making them champions of, Champions League, even the World Cup, stuff like that. But for Tillman, I think a 77 is very fair here. He got a +3 after an incredible debut season at PSV. It's looking like he's even taking his game to new strides. I'd be very surprised if he's still at PSV come next season, and I think a substantial upgrade could happen again. I would not be surprised if Tillman's in the 80 club next year. It might be a little bit of a hot take there, but I think he's going to get a marquee move. He's one of the best players in the Eredivisie, which is actually a respectable league, unlike Scotland. So I think a 77 is more than fair.
Yeah, I think it's a little on the high side, but I don't have too much of an issue with this one because, again, it's the best team in the league, and it's kind of obvious that they would give him a big boost. And I think if he moves to the Prem, he'll get an 80 for sure. Maybe we'll see. I think the game is very reliant on the league that you play in. But moving on right here to Johnny Cardoso, he got his card added midway through last season. He was a 73. Now he's a 76 after a really good start at Betis. I'll leave my thoughts after yours. What do you think? Do you think that Johnny deserves a 76 rating?
Well, I think regardless of what you think his rating should be, the fact that he got a +3 in this new game, despite only being added into last one mid-season, I think is very, very impressive. It just shows how quickly he did adapt to La Liga. I think he was very good in the second half of last season, obviously his first 6 months or so at the club. I do think that his summer with the USMNT was negative. His recent camp with the USMNT was very negative, and he just hasn't gotten into Betis' starting lineup this season. He's also dealing with an injury currently, so if it was based on current form, I think I would have him lower, but if we look at what he did last season, maybe 1 or 2 lower, but I don't think this is too unreasonable of a take.
Yeah, no, as long as we don't watch that game against Canada or the game against Colombia or the game against Panama, I think that this is quite reasonable, really. For club, I think 75. Which I don't have too much of an issue with it. But yeah, for the USMNT, those performances gotta tune up for sure. Moving on right here to Well, we have Chris Richards, the second best center back. He was left behind Cameron Carter-Vickers, 76. Consistent starter now at the Prem for Crystal Palace. What do you think? Do you think this is on the low side? Should be a little higher?
Well, I actually think that 76 is perfect for Chris Richards. He got a +2 from last game, and it makes a lot of sense. I just think the fact that CCV is at a 77 makes it look low, but when we face reality and see that CCV should probably be, I think, 74 at max, and even that I think is generous. But I think any rational person would probably put him as a silver card. We know Weah aren't necessarily the most rational at times, but I think 76 is perfect for Richards, to be honest.
Completely agree. It's one of the few ones that this was exactly what I would give him if I was the one to give him a rating. I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with this one. Again, the CCV thing kind of makes this look dumb, but I think, like you said, if we face reality, this is the right rating. And now moving on right here to Yunus Musah, a name that has been, for the first time, I think, in his entire Usmnt career, now being questioned a little bit by the majority of fans, at least raised some question marks. Do you agree with a 75 rating and a boost of 1 for Yunus Musah?
Well, to use the LeBron quote, it's about damn time that people are finally questioning the guy, because let's face it, he hasn't been at the level for so long now. I think he's kind of living off, I mean, you're the one who says it all the time. He's living off his good performance in the World Cup, and that was like 2 years ago. So I do think it's very notable that Musah is, I think he's the worst rated player at Milan. I don't even think they have like any prospects in the game yet. That'll probably change in the next year or two, but I'm pretty sure from their main squad, he's the lowest rated out of all of them. I don't know if I would go that far. There's a couple of squad players that they have that are kind of bad, but I think 75, it might even be a little bit too high. He got a +1 from last game, which I think is kind of crazy. Maybe it's just the playing at AC Milan effect, but I think if he was still at Valencia, I think he'd be a silver. That's all I'll say.
I'll give him a 71 if I was the guy giving the ratings right here. Sounds really harsh, but I legitimately don't see anything in Musah's game right now. Like you said once, people love the idea of Musah, but they don't really see what Musah is and what he's coming to be. There are no real signs of polishing anything really to be a 75. But moving on right here to Gio Reyna, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the biggest downgrade we had for a player, at least of the A-teamers. He drops to a 75. He was a 78 last year. That had that horrible spell at Forest. Maybe that's what it is. The game could finally pair him up with some Prem players, and it didn't really work out. So sad to see, but do you agree with this one for Gio, or do you think it should be a little higher?
Yeah, well, I think it was the Nottingham Forest thing, because Matt Turner and Gio Reyna both got a -3, which was the biggest downgrade for all of the players on this list, at least. I mean, there's probably some MLS guy that got a worse downgrade, but I mean, who cares, really? These are the guys that are relevant right now. So I think it makes sense. Honestly, if you look at last season, a -3 is more than fair. I think you can maybe argue that he was a little too high to begin with last season. A -3 seems like the right amount of downgrade, but I think 75 might honestly still be a little bit too high. If you look at the natural ability, it seems about right. Maybe he should even be a higher, but you can't really argue with game time, with his form, and with all the injury history. So it seems harsh to say, especially when you see Musah also at a 75. I'd definitely rate Reyna above Musah. It seems harsh to give him a silver. I'll keep him at a 75.
I would actually drop it a little bit. I would put him 73, 74, especially, but looking at Musah right there, Musah's like CCV on this list. I don't think he should be anywhere near that rating. But moving on right here to the next one, and let's hope that Gio does get more minutes. I think a miracle needs to happen in January, a good move finally. Something needs to change for a better rating for next year. But now we have another center back right here, Mark McKenzie, with both been singing some praises, saying that the guy deserves at least a chance. He made a big move, and he gets a slight upgrade, right? Well, he doesn't get a upgrade as well. It's just a 0 upgrade, no change really. 74 to Toulouse. Do you think this one's the correct call or not?
I think 74 is right, and honestly, I mean, I think maybe based on his form, he would have deserved an upgrade, a slight +1, but that probably would have been from a 73 to a 74. He was 74 last year, so it seems about right. Just, again, I'll keep going back to it. The fact that CCV is 3 ratings higher than him, ridiculous. It should be the other way around.
Yeah, it does mess up the whole criteria, really. I don't know what EA were cooking at that time, but at 74, I think it's very fair, honestly. If he was 73, I wouldn't really have an issue. I think that moving from the Belgium league, it's kind of hard to get a good rating, so the fact he got that is impressive in itself. I think it's just fair, and he probably has a really high potential in the game, really fast too. Always the starter by the 2030 World Cup if you play career mode. Moving on right here to Josh Sargent, 74 rating. I think they might have done Sargent a little bit wrong. He got a 2 upgrade, didn't get that much game time, but he absolutely blitzed through the championship when he got game time. I'm curious to see, do you agree with this one or not? I think he was very, very low rated last game. I don't know about now.
Yeah, I think they righted their wrong from last season, and the fact that he only played basically half a season and still scored so many goals, I mean, it's just what he does. He scores goals. That's what you're going to get from Josh Sargent, unless he's in a USA kit. But I think there's some other external reasons for that. I think it's not completely on him that he hasn't scored in that long. He always just seems to get a slight little injury whenever he gets called up that keeps him out sidelined, which is very unfortunate. I think if he fixed that, maybe he'd be a couple ratings higher. I think at 74 just makes sense. I'll be curious to see again, does he have the injury prone or the American flag next to him? I think maybe he's another one who deserves it.
I was going to say that if they were really paying attention to him and his injury record, he would have had it by now. So let's see. But I think it's fair. 74 is probably fair. I think it was just very low rated last year. But moving on right here to Joe Scally, the Sergiño Dest backup. So if you are a purist and you want to line up the USMNT with on your career mode or even online, you're going to start him and he's going to be a 74. What do you think, Brayden? Do you think that they did Joe a little harsh, especially since he had some good performances, or is this just fair?
Well, I think Joe Scally actually last season is probably the anomaly from our players, because I feel like most of them that we've been talking about had such a good season with their clubs, and then the summer was a little bit disappointing with the USMNT. I think Scally was the exact opposite. To be honest, I don't really think he's been great for Gladbach ever, really. I mean, he's obviously had some good games. You're going to get that from a player. And I don't know if he's had necessarily any horrible games, but I think overall the level has been bottom half Bundesliga, which, to be fair, is what Gladbach are now. But if you look like 10 years or so, I remember them being in the Champions League. It's just such a fall for the club as a whole. But for the national team, I mean, he was locking up Vinicius Jr., Luis Diaz, those types of players over the summer. So I think a 74, if you balance it out, I'd probably give him a 72. But the fact that he was 74 in last game, giving him no upgrade, no downgrade, that part seems pretty fair.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of a reverse situation of what they did with Sargent. Maybe he was a little bit overrated for last game, but 74, I don't know. I feel like it just sounds right. If I was going to, without looking at this, if you told me, hey, give a rating for Scally on FC25, I'll say 74, really. So I don't have an issue with that one. Moving on to our next player, it's going to be Matt Turner, as you said, alongside Gio, the biggest downgrade. He had his shot at Forest. Commend the guy for trying. Didn't really work out. Now he's a bench at Palace and he is a 74, so still the highest rated American goalkeeper. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to group him up with Horvath because I think there's not really a lot to say about Horvath. For Turner, we'll start. I think the fact that he was 77 in the first place is completely ridiculous. It's that big club tax. I mean, you talked about the MLS one when we talked about CCV, and I'll just give one quick example of that one. Darlington Nagbe is still a 75 in the game, which would have him at the same rating as Musah and Gio Reyna. That's a little bit crazy to me. But for the big club tax, I mean, Turner was at Arsenal until this past game. Last year was his first year moving on. So they had him at a 77 as Arsenal's backup keeper. Now, I mean, he got a -3. I would argue it's still too high. I probably would have given him a -6 or -7. I don't know if he's necessarily a 74 rated player, especially when you look at some of the other guys that we have that are around that level. For Horvath as well, he was a 72 last game. He got somehow no change. To be fair, I think his main downfall has been at the start of this season, so maybe next year we'll see him drop a little bit, but even Horvath, I think, should probably be maybe even 5 ratings lower. I think it seems a little harsh to say, but I think if you compare it to some other championship goalkeepers, they're probably both like 5 spots too high.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Matt Turner, 74. Really? Do we really think that? Does anyone really think that? I'll put him at 71 if I was the one to give him a rating. Still silver, I guess, but yeah, we are in dire need for a new goalkeeper. Moving on to Tim Weah, who I'll be honest, I'm a little shocked that he's this low rating. I expected the game to rate him a little higher. 74 for the guy that arguably got Greg fired, but also made us be a little embarrassed over the summer. So your thoughts on it, since you are the biggest Weah fan we have.
Yeah, nice sarcasm there. I think 74 does seem fair though, honestly. The fact that he's even a rotational player at Juventus, he's I think one of the few that doesn't have the big club tax of being a little bit overrated on the game. I will say the one thing that doesn't sit right with me is the fact that he didn't change from last game. I think his performances last season, especially with the USMNT last summer, warranted a -2 or -3. However, I would have expected him to be up at 77 like Turner was. So I think a 74 does actually make sense.
Completely agree. If he was 74 last season, I think he should be lower, but at the grand scheme of things, that's probably about his level. Moving on to Brendinho right here, making a comeback. Who would have thought? He has his card back with Leeds. That's still amazes me. But he got a downgrade right here of 1 point after his spell at Union Berlin. Do you think that he was hard done by?
Nah, I think it makes sense, to be honest. I think the -1 does make sense. If you look at, especially the first half of the season, where, to be fair, I think a lot of people weren't paying more attention to Union Berlin in the first half of the season because in the season prior, they'd finished high. They were in the Champions League. It was a really bad first half. The second half was better, especially for Brenden. I mean, they were in a relegation battle, so people kind of stopped paying attention because it wasn't as interesting to the casual fan. I mean, I think relegation battles are great, to be honest. I think it produces some of the best football because teams are fighting for their lives, and I think it did get the best out of Brenden. I think going back to the championship as a 73, maybe he can improve it if he continues to play well this season, but I think for now it's solid and maybe even 1 or 2 too high.
Yeah, I think it's solid. I think I wouldn't put him any lower. I know some people really don't like the guy, but 73 sounds just about right, really. But even then, well, I don't know what I said that I would put Gio at. People are going to flame me for that if they try to compare, but I think 73 is fine for Aaronson. Moving on right here to Ricardo Pepi, 73. I'll be honest, I'm a little shocked. He got an upgrade, 2 points actually, too, for basically riding the bench. He was effective when he came on, but 73 for the backup striker at PSV. Do you think that this is right, especially considering our other strikers? We have Josh Sargent and Balogun ahead of him. Do you agree with it?
Well, to your point, I was actually going to combine him here with Haji Wright because he's also listed, I think, as a striker in the game, even though he's been playing more of a left wing for Coventry. He's also a 73, and I think it's the complete opposite situation for both of them than it should have been. Pepi was a 71. He got a +2 after a full season of riding the bench. Like you said, I mean, yes, he was productive in the limited minutes he got, but I don't know if that production necessarily warranted a +2. On the other hand, Haji Wright had an incredible season, one of the most underrated players in the championship, got a -1. How is that even possible? I mean, how can you watch this guy and say, yeah, he got worse over the year? To be fair, he was at a 74 before. I think maybe that was a little bit too high. But looking at Josh Sargent at a 74, I think Haji Wright's a more complete footballer than him. I'd probably put Haji higher at a 75 or even 76, especially when you look at Balogun at a 77. I know it's a much better league, Ligue 1, but Haji Wright was way better. I'd probably put Haji at a 75. Pepi, 73 does make sense. I just think it's a little crazy that he was +2.
Yeah, I'm shocked that Haji is. Since you combined them, I'm going to combine them too. I'm absolutely shocked that he got a -1. This is crazy. I would put him 75, and I think that would be reasonable. No one would have an issue with that one. And Pepi, 73, I guess it's fine, really, but I don't know. If he was very productive on the first half of the season when he got those minutes. After that, it was kind of... But moving on right here to our next player, it's going to be, well, I was almost going to skip Tim Ream. I think he's almost done with the USMNT, but thoughts on a 73? I think he's riding on a bit of the MLS tax. I don't know if he would be 73 if he was in the Prem. What do you think?
Yeah, well, since we're towards the end of the video here, the last couple of players, I'm just going to combine Tim Ream and Kristoffer Lund because I think for Ream, there's not a lot to say. I mean, he's a 73 this year. He was a 73 last year. I think it does make sense. I mean, he definitely did lose a step. I probably would have given him a downgrade, but I think when you consider the level of our other center backs, especially Austin Trusty's at a 72, I think Ream still does deserve to be a little bit higher than Trusty. And again, I mean, CCV being 77. If CCV is a 77, Tim Ream's probably like an 85. So I think the 73 is fair. And then for Kristoffer Lund, it's nice to see him go up +2, break into the 70 club. He's at a 71, the lowest rated of our main 18 players, which is, as honestly, I think I'd put him above some of them. I forgot Luca de la Torre is here as well. That seems to be the theme. I feel like everyone forgets Luca de la Torre just in general. So I'll talk about him as well. I think Luca, he got a -1, 72. It just kind of makes sense. I will say his performance with the Usmnt, the last camp, I was pleasantly surprised by, but overall, I think it makes sense. I'd probably put Lund even ahead of him, definitely ahead of Horvath. But overall, I mean, I think these last three guys are about at the right spot.
I'll be honest, I'll give Ream a 68. I think that Lund's with a perfect spot. I'll give him exactly a 71. Horvath, who really cares? I think we already talked about him. Luca de la Torre, who really cares too? I mean, 72. Yeah, he did look all right, but it was Canada and New Zealand too at the end of the day. I mean, the fact that some players look bad is absolutely shocking. And that brings it to a wrap. So before we leave, any other players that you want to mention, Brayden, that we left out and you personally want to throw out a name?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, like I said in the start of the video, if you want to know our thoughts on any of the other guys, specifically the new guys breaking into the team, the guys who are at the Olympics, other guys who just broke into the USMNT like Marlon Fossey, Aiden Morris, some of the dual nationals like Koleosho, any of those guys, let us know in the comments. Maybe you even want to see another video. We'd be more than happy to make a part 2 of this with those guys. I just want to give a quick shout out to some of the young guys who got their first Eafc card this year. Cole Campbell at Borussia Dortmund. He's been so good for their youth teams and now their second team. He's playing very well. Hopefully he makes his Bundesliga debut this season. He's at a 64. Very excited to see him. And if you're into career mode, these 5 guys that I'm mentioning, definitely have them. If you're doing a road to glory, definitely sign them. Henri Chase is another one. He's at a 61, starting now for Stuttgart in some games. I think it's crazy that he's even come to this, but I mean, personally, I'd put him even a little bit higher as a Bundesliga starter. He's one of the big dual nationals we need to recruit. Shout out to him. Another Bundesliga player who's now kind of in the first team, but he hasn't really been making matchday squads. Noah Kai Banks, the US U19 international, probably our best U20 in terms of overall and potential. I mean, I think he's such a good player for the future. Loki, if he makes the matchday squad for Augsburg anytime soon, give him a USMNT call-up. It can't be worse than what we have right now. He's also at a 61. Congratulations to him for getting his first card. Joel Emasuen at Werder Bremen, the striker. He's been bagging goals for fun for their second team. He made his Bundesliga debut at the end of last year. He's at a 60. And then one more, Aiden Dausch, also at Coventry City, also a striker like Haji, Wright. He's at a 56, got his first card. Congratulations to all 5 of them. It's a huge moment being in a game like EAFC, and I think they're 5 that you need to look out for in the future. Also, they all play abroad, which is a bit of a nice touch, but anyone else, we'll be happy again to answer your comments and definitely reply to everybody.
Yeah, if you guys by any chance want to see a part 2, like Brayden said, let us know. We'll be happy to do it. There are a few players that are still interesting to mention now if you guys want that. But thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.